So with that in mind, we're going to go to our last segment, um, which is records retention and audit preparation. Now, records retention and making sure that you're keeping records about your business, as you can imagine, is important when it comes to satisfying your obligations to the government and to prime contractors when you're so. So with that, I want to turn the mic over to my partner, Anthony Davis.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone and speak about this topic. And I just wanted to thank everyone, for all the panelists, everyone working together to put this presentation together, and also for our attendees who took the time to listen over these past 2 days. It literally is a ton of materials. And our goal in really preparing this webinar was really to educate anyone on all the key areas for becoming or being a federal contractor. And if you do need it, we're happy to share the slides. And as Chris said, we're recording the presentation, so anyone can go back and listen to whatever segment they want to refresh on. But I think the beginning few slides, the agenda was incredibly comprehensive in terms of the things that you need to know or should be doing in terms of being a federal contractor. And again, it was just the one slide, I think it was slide 8, Chris, that you showed and refreshed on today, was, the US government being the largest buyer of goods and services in the world, spending, I think the statistic was $535 billion per year, and $100 billion with small businesses. I mean, to say that there's opportunity there would be an understatement. And while there are lots of challenges, as you can see from this presentation, there's also lots of opportunities for ways to get help from the government. And that's what some of the topics we covered. So while it's complex, it could be very rewarding to a business if you take the time to go through the process of bidding and getting a contract. And then it really, as I think has been highlighted from what we've all been talking about, is being disciplined in your approach to handling this contract. Because in particular, for the topic that I'm going to talk about, records retention and audit preparation, just the mere fact that it's a topic, audit preparation, should highlight for anyone doing government contracts that it's an area you have to be ready for. And not to be overly dramatic, but everyone's familiar with a lot of those stories in the news in the past about government investigations of government contractors for overpricing things and overselling things, and where they get audited and get in trouble. So, the general view and the things that we say to clients are, the government they've got one office that's handing out the contracts and making payments, and down the hallway is another office of investigators auditing all the contract work and making sure everyone is doing everything properly. And maintaining your records is really a critical step in being ready for any kind of audit or investigation by any government agency that you're working with. And so what, just want to make sure I'm on the right slide here. Let's see. There we go. So, so really, document and record retention compliance is really something every company should be thinking about, should be doing, and it really strengthens your organization. Not simply if you're a government contractor, but really it strengthens your organization to be ready for to respond to any inquiry from anybody, a customer, a vendor, especially the government, to protect your business. And we have found that this is an area where a lot of clients have compliance problems. And again, it really is an audit preparation requirement. And all of the contracts have particular references to the FAR, the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations. And we've touched on that throughout the seminars, the seminar over the 2 days. But that really is an area of regulations that was created to really ensure that there's fairness, transparency in all government contracting. And part of that is to have specific requirements for contractors to maintain records. And while there's whether it's a legal duty or not, as I note here, you really should have a policy. And what we find is if the government requests records and the company doesn't have a good records retention policy, and the team or your internally people aren't following it, maintaining records, it leads to problems. It's hard to respond, and even if you did things right, and you can't respond properly with documentation, you could end up having substantial financial penalties. So we tell clients, you've really got to take this seriously, this records retention, which if you're a private company, it's something you should be doing, but if you don't, it may not lead to these kinds of consequences when you're a government contractor. So sort of the goal of my talk here is to give you sort of the tools that you need to understand it, the big picture, and then I have a few slides that I won't go into a lot of detail about, but I provide the slides so you have the references right to the particular FARs that give you the specifics and the requirements for document retention. Again, like a lot of these areas, it can get very complicated. And it applies whether you're bidding, you're performing a contract, or you're protesting a contract. You're literally, like you have in your general business practice, you're going to have thousands and thousands of documents, and they need to be retained as part of your company records retention policy. And sort of just as a big picture, we find that if you haven't done it and you're planning to become a federal contractor, if you haven't prepared a records retention plan for your company, do it. But it's not just a document that you write up and email around. I recommend, I've done many for clients, that you draft it sort of to fit your company. Every company is a little bit different, but you also work as a team with all the sort of key people in the organization that have responsibilities for documents like payroll records, finance, the bidding department, the people who are working and performing the contracts. Have everyone buy into it and make sure everything is covered, so everyone knows exactly what the organization's requiring. I think that's really key for having a good records retention plan, is not just to draw one up, but really do a teamwork effort in preparing it together. You'll be amazed what you'll learn from your colleagues when you sit down and actually talk about these things and talk about the records they have, and you may not even be aware what different departments are maintaining, what challenges they have. Again, the federal acquisition regulations are the key to this. And what you'll find is that every contract that you enter into with the government is going to have lots of references to various sections of the FAR. And every agency will have its own particular FAR references. And the records maintenance may vary agency to agency. But your obligation as the contractor is to read the contract, review all of those references to the various FAR regulations. They're easily accessible, they're online, you can find them easily and read them. But your obligations will be whatever set forth in the contract, whatever that agency's specific regulations are, what the FAR requires, and whether you read it or not, it's going to be applicable. And it's very common to do all these references and internal references to the FAR from the contract without stating all those provisions in the agreement. So when you're looking at those contracts, make sure you're looking at those references. And here, what I'm giving some high-level sources for the actual FAR regulations, the agency's requirements for maintaining public records. And this slide is really to give you the key FAR part 4.00 that goes into the detail of what the contractor's retention policies are. That's under FAR 4.7. And sort of describing the scope of the records. And it's really everything. It's digital, electronic form, as is typical now, as well as paper. But it's really everything, from the negotiation, the administration of the contract, and then any particular audit requirements from the particular agency that you're working with. It's really the start to finish of your government contract life cycle, not just sort of the documents you have for the particular project you're working on, but again, it's that negotiation, administration of the contract, and then the actual work, as well as some audit requirements. I highlight here again FAR Part 4.7 that you could pull up, read it. It's very detailed, but I tried to give an idea of what the general requirements are. And rather than going into the specifics, it's just important to note here that contractors includes subcontracts and subcontractors. That's a key takeaway for all of these requirements. Just because you're a subcontractor doesn't mean you have any less of an obligation to comply with all the FAR regulations. And here, this slide, again, I'm highlighting, and this is more for reference for anyone who wants to really dive into this. This is the FAR 4.702, the applicability of the regs to a particular contract. Again, it applies to everything. And what I want to really convey is, I think of this like if anyone took a course in calculus in high school or college, but they make you grind out the first section or chapters on doing long-handed calculus, and then they show you the easy way, how to solve calculus problems simply after that. And this is kind of the same way here. I've got a lot of details about what the records are, how they're defined, what's included, but the key here is that records retention is 6 years from the date of final payment. 6 years from final payment. So it's a long period, and it's really all of the records you have in terms of the work that you did negotiating, administering, and receiving payments. So 6 years from final payment is the key. And it applies again under FAR 4.8, as this slide summarizes really in detail all of the documents. And here, as I point out, it's the background for the decision making of the acquisition process, supporting actions taken, information for reviews and investigation. It's information for essential facts in the event of litigation or congressional inquiries. So as you can see, the need to retain these records is really critical. And if you're going to protect your company, if there is some sort of audit investigation, even at the highest level of congressional inquiry, you are required to have these records. You're required to respond to all those audit requests, and it would also assist you not only in protecting your company, but asserting your company's rights in the event that you are maybe protesting an award that went to a competitor and you thought you should have won. That's another area where the document retention is really key. This slide sort of highlights a little nuance in the complexity of the regs, meaning there is, while I say 6 years from final payment, I added this slide because the regs do make clear that it's sort of from the end of your fiscal year is an important consideration for calculating the retention period. So if your fiscal year is a calendar year and you get payment in your final payment, and you make your entry in your books in October of 2020, then your 6 years starts and you continue to maintain your records, but your 6 years would start from January 1 of the next fiscal year. So I wanted to highlight that. It may not come into play, but it looked like an important wrinkle that may come into play. So as I sort of started out talking about, is this idea of having an effective records retention plan for your company is not only good for a successful company and strengthening your organization, if you do it right and have everyone buy into putting it together properly, but it is a legal requirement in the government contracting industry, as I've highlighted here and given the particular FAR regulations. And as we've seen lots of clients, struggle with this over the years, the sophisticated companies that do lots of contracting work have this down. They know they have to keep all their records, and the best practices for compliance with the FAR, with your contract obligations, and a good records retention plan, we've summarized here. And as you can imagine, it's annually reviewing it. Looking at your schedule of the time periods you have to keep documents, looking at your contracts, and having people who are responsible, the stakeholders for particular contracts, having them sign a certification acknowledging they understand what the requirements are and that they're in compliance. Have your workforce attend annual training about document retention, and include in that litigation hold procedures. That, as if you're familiar with that is if there is a pending claim or a pending investigation or a pending audit that's going on, you have to suspend all of those document destruction plans that you have. So if you're holding documents for 6 years, at the end of the 6 years, you can discard those records. And that's a good plan, because you don't want to have mountains of records over 50 years piling up that you have to pay to maintain. But in the event of an ongoing litigation, an audit, an investigation, you have to put in place a litigation hold. Your records retention plan should address that, how it's done, how it's disseminated, how it's maintained. But that hold would tell everyone to suspend the document destruction policies in place, hold everything till the audit, investigation, or litigation is resolved, and then resume your normal practices. And again, really just a reminder here, retain everything for the time period on the retention schedule. Make sure you review the contracts and any FAR regulations, and the FAR regulations are amended at different times, and every agency has its own requirements. But once you review that, understand what your obligations are for the contract, you put it in your schedule, and you make sure that your team is trained on it and everyone's acknowledging they understand it, and you should be in good shape for complying with your obligations, having a successful contract, and hopefully growing the revenue of your business more with more contracts. And again, thank you for everyone who's attended. That's the end of my talk. We all hope this has been a really helpful overview of the becoming a federal contractor. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to my partner, Chris Santomassimo.
Tony, thanks very much. Thank you to everybody who's attended yesterday and today for our program. Look, I hope these things didn't scare anyone. Frankly, what we were hoping to do was to demonstrate what a great opportunity federal government business can be for lots of companies. Certainly, there are rules. There's things you have to be aware of, and things you have to make sure you follow. And we covered a lot of the high level stuff and some of the most important things. But I think, especially when you look at some of the discussions that Mark and Antonella did in particular, they show you that there's a ton of opportunity out there, and we'd love to help partner with you to take advantage of those opportunities. So just to remind you who spoke today, I'd like to thank Mark Snyderman, Antonella Colella for excellent content, as well as Anthony Davis, Alex Anglin, Marco Gonzalez, Bill Greenbaum, and I'm Chris Santomassimo. we really appreciate everybody joining today, and we look forward to staying in touch. Feel free to reach out if we can be of any help. Thanks very much. That'll conclude our program for today.